So guys, today we're going to be doing another battle. This is going to be me playing as the Egyptians against an opponent. He's going to be playing as Macedon. This is actually going to be a very good battle. I hope you guys can learn from this and I hope you enjoy. My opponent plays very well, and you'll notice actually, and I'll point this out in the video, that it seems like he's using hotkeys, and that's it's actually going to be very efficient with the army that he's building, that he's using right here, which is going to be pikes. Pikes are actually surprisingly maneuverable, flexible, and responsive, as you'll see in this battle, and it's all based off hotkeying. It's actually this opponent who has sort of inspired me. I think I'm going to start looking into using the hotkeys a lot more, especially for these types of builds. Anyways, let's look at his army. He has mostly an army composed of foot companions and thorax pikemen, so he has a lot of those pikemen, and then he has 6 of his cavalry, so those are going to be a combination of aspis and companion cavalry. Myself, I only have 4 cavalry, but what I also have is elephants and chariots hidden around the side, and I actually have some spears. So what you saw earlier in the battle is I have 3 hidden units on the very left. My goal is to sort of make my opponent fixated on the front and try and get him around the back with those 3 units. I figured chariots, cavalry, and spearmen are enough to deliver a blow around the back and hopefully knock him off. Anyways, you can see here he's formed up with his massive pikes, and we're going to start a dance here, and it's going to be a lot of jockeying for the positions on the side. My build right here obviously has mostly melee infantry, and so my goal is to get around the sides of his pikes. Attacking them head on is suicide, so I'm going to be trying to get at him. It's sort of like trying to get past a wall, and he's constantly going to have to keep shifting the wall, so you're going to see a lot of this dancing go around, and I hope you can learn from it. Anyways, what he's doing right here is he's starting to move towards the woods, so I'm a little worried about that. In the woods, it's probably good for his spears, because it means my cavalry can't land hammer and anvil strikes on the back of them too effectively. Also, I can't really see what's going on. I have to zoom in very closely to see if his spears are facing the right, all that stuff. So I try and push a little bit more on the right and try and engage his cavalry on the very right flank. And to hold him up here, what I'm going to do is feign a charge right here. I obviously don't anticipate charging his men, but it's enough to get him to pull his cavalry back. So he's going to halt right here, and what I decide to do is, okay, looks like I've caught him in the middle, stopped him, and so what we're going to do is we're going to push right. So in order to do that, I have to cover my left flank, obviously, which is why I have spears there. They're going to be moving up, holding up that front. My center is going to move back, as you see me often do in many of my battles, and then I'm going to push the right side. Now, in order to push the right side, I don't have as many cavalry as him, so what I'm going to do is move in elephants, my general, and then also another cavalry body, and that's going to be enough to push him back, and we'll see how my opponent reacts. Anyways, you can see my cavalry dancing in front of him has drawn fire from his archers. He put them on fire mode. That does less damage, so that was kind of lucky for me, although he does land 1 kill. So that's a dangerous maneuver on my part. I might have kept them a bit closer for too long, but I figured if they're not staying there for, you know, too long a time, it keeps his forces fixed. So you can see here, now he has to react to what I'm doing, and that's because these elephants are basically the key players to this. They are what are dictating the battle right now. Elephants are such big targets and have such a big impact on the battle that they are kind of the centerpiece that everyone's going to be looking at. So depending on where they are moving, that's how my opponent's going to react. So I decided to push heavily on the right, and you can see his cavalry on the left are going to start pushing this way. He's rearranging his archers. He's doing everything possible to combat that flanking attack. He's moving his whole army there. So you can see now he's moving all the way to the right. So my opponent is doing a good job of keeping me from moving around the flanks. But by moving too heavily on this side, I'm actually going to be able to move more effectively on the left. That opens me up, and I figure he's busy microing, so I'm going to pull these guys around back. Now you can see he's opened up this side here, and I'm going to decide to charge in. You can see all his pikes immediately went into spear wall or pike formation, and I think that's the speed with which he did it means he has them hotkeyed. So you can see how effectively they dropped them. Now they're moving again. I think he took them out of it very rapidly. You can see just how quickly they're deploying. So my opponent is really not letting me get around the side. I'm having a hard time. And that's what he does very effectively this battle. You can see my units in the front are really not forming a solid line. Keep in mind that you don't actually have to form a solid line. Just because my units are in the vicinity means he has enough of a threat in the center. I don't have to be arrayed directly at him. Your units can be a little bit facing in different directions, because especially against a spear wall, it's not like I'm going to be charging head on, but just the pressure there is all I need. Now you can see I forced him into more of a choke. At this point he's going to unleash with his arrows, so I'm going to try and wrap around the sides. I figured I've got his cav in a good position. My spears have actually made it around the side, so they're going to be the thing that pushes his cavalry back, forces him to fold in on himself, makes him more and more compact. At the same time, I'm not quite in the position to move my melee infantry forward, so what I decide to do is move around the sides here. I'm going to sacrifice one cav unit to try and pin his down. My opponent in response is going to move all his spears back. He's going to start shuffling his cavalry, but what this has done is it's allowed me to get some of his Sarissa cav here with my spears, and this whole flank here is going to be open. Same on the other side. I'm going to keep swinging these guys around his thorax pikemen, try and engage them, but my opponent is going to be quick enough and react and move them out of the way just before my guys can get there. But what you can see here is I've trapped his cavalry right behind his spears. He doesn't have much spear support, and so they're all in glob, and that's when I'm going to start charging in with all my units. From the front, however, it's still an impregnable wall. I can't really get around there, but as they're reforming, I'm going to try and put some pressure on them. You can see what I've done in the back is my cavalry are moving in. His cavalry are not really in the best position to react, so I'm going to get a 2-on-1 charge right here. That's going to be to my benefit. So even though he has numerically superior cavalry, because I was able to engage them in such like a cornered position, he can't take advantage of his numbers. His spears out here that are sort of not in perfect arrangement, I'm going to try and engage them with my guys. I'm going to deploy my chariots and try and move them into the thick of that infantry fight, or at least around the sides of his guys. And this huge cav blob is exactly where I'm going to charge in my elephants. My opponent, however, switches targeting from his archers right onto my elephants. My cavalry right there decide not to engage. They're going to try and free up those infantry there. Same time, I'm going to try and move my chariots over to the front. You can see there's that gap in his line that I'm going to try and engage. Over on the right, I gotta pull my guys out there facing the brunt of his spears. That's not where I want to be. My elephants at the same time have lost control, but that's fine. They're going to be charging in and amongst his men. He's going to charge forward here and decides to go for the juicy target that is my chariots. Chariots actually do relatively well against horses in this occasion, especially with infantry supports, so they're going to take him out. Still a massive scrum back here. I'm not doing super well, but that's because I'm facing his spear, so I decide, I have my chariots and these infantry on the flank. Let's go ahead and just push these guys right through the middle and try and slice up his men that aren't facing me. This doesn't go actually according to plan. As you can see right here, my chariots are in attack order, but they're just kind of sitting there, and that gives enough time for my opponent to start rearranging his troops. And this is going to be bad for me. My chariots are caught in a bad position. I have to retract them, so they're going to start pulling out. My elephants are still doing damage, but over here I had to retreat my guys. So what you can see is in the center he's won, and I'm trying to push him back on the extremities, but his spears are being actually very, very effective, and he has so many of them that anytime I try and charge him, he can reform and pose a pretty solid front against me. I see his spears here are out of spear formation. I'm going to move my chariots in. Over here, I'm trying to knock out his aspis and his extremities, his skirmishers, all the troops out there. My chariots move right in here. I figured they get a couple kills, but at that exact instant, my troops rout, and my chariots are left high and dry, and he basically collapses on them. So the chariots right there were not used super effectively, but again, it is kind of hard to do it when he has a lot of spears, so I would applaud the build of my opponent. So what's happening right now is basically we're moving into a new phase of the battle. He's knocked out my chariots and my elephants. I've knocked out most of his cavalry, and I'm going to try and reform. My opponent is going to try and reform as well. He knows that the strength of his pikes is going to be their uniformity, their if they can form a solid front, so that's what he's going to retreat to do. My guys are going to make sure I don't attack them, but he still has some cavalry guys here, and they're going to try and pick off my men while his main front can just kind of sit there, and he's going to try and whittle me down as much as possible and just take away as many of my advantages. I form up into a shield wall, and I'm able to get a surround on his general and cavalry here, and I figured that was good for me because if I can knock out his general, that's going to be a huge blow to his morale and his abilities. His pike wall in response is going to be moving up rapidly. You can see he activates some abilities. He's going to be moving up with the vengeance, but at the same time he still is kind of nervous about engaging my troops because I have troops behind his back, behind his flank. I'm going to take the opportunity to charge some of his skirmishers there. They're just keep flaming my guys, so I'm going to try and take them out. Meanwhile, his main body's keeping the pressure on. I'm trying to ward off his cavalry with those troops there. My opponent cleverly moves back one of his spears, catches me right before I hit his guys, but at least I was able to ward them off. Now he has more cavalry going around the side, and so he's actually not engaging his spears. He's just holding them back for the opportune moment. He's kind of using up all his troops that don't comprise the bulk of his infantry, and he's going to wear them out till they run out and try and see how much damage they can inflict on me, and then follow up with his spears. This is a very effective strategy, something I would recommend you guys do and that you should learn from my opponent. At this point, he started to sandwich my troops. His cavalry there held out much longer, and I was hoping to, kill his general in the last moment, but it was not to be. My guys just got surrounded. So what I'm going to be doing here is trying to hit his pikes. His pikes are all engaged, and so that means they're going to have some backs facing me. My opponent, however, has kept 2 of his pikes in the back, and they're going to be running some anti-cavalry movements. One of my Galatians is still full health, so I know if I can get some of his pikes out of formation, that's going to be perfect. I backcharge some of his cavalry with those spears. My Galatians over there engage some of his guys, and finally I'm able to out-micro his spearmen in the back and get at his archers. But at this point, they're kind of inconsequential. Here my Galatians are engaging with his pikemen. I kind of have a surround, but again, my opponent is quick on his micro and he gets them back into spear formation. Over here, the fight is getting desperate. My spearmen are not holding up well. My cavalry are going to try and come out and land an anvil strike. Thank God my general is still alive. The Royal Peltist does very well. I go ahead and pop the rally ability and the raised flag ability because I'm not sure if my opponent's going to kill my general or not. He decides to disengage and replace his Aspis cavalry with some spears. That's going to be a good move because he wants to keep those cavalry alive for hammer and anvil. Over here I'm trying to keep an eye on these guys. I don't want them facing the full brunt of his spear wall. Seeing as they're fully formed, I'm going to pull my guys back. Over here you can see I'm trying to pull out. I don't want to engage too much with his spear wall. My opponent over here figures these are the last of my strong troops. He's going to charge them. I go into shield wall. That's the best way to fight cavalry, is to brace yourself for the attack. So I'm actually going to do pretty well. Over here I see some of his pikemen are low on numbers. They're exhausted, so I'm going to charge them from the side. Again, my opponent is quick to react, quick to click that drop, go into phalanx ability. And so it doesn't do as much damage as I expected. If I had some infantry in the vicinity to follow up, I probably could have routed them, but my opponent is able to kill me. As I was saying over here, I'm pretty effective against his cavalry, knock out one of his Aspis, and at the same time, I'm just going to try and dance these guys around. I'm hoping my Galatians can start mopping on his units. I know they've been engaged in combat for a while. You can see his companion and his thorax spearmen, thorax pikemen, excuse me, are all going to be pretty tired, pretty exhausted, so I'm hoping I can kind of keep dancing. My opponent realizes that I might be winning the fight here, and so he decides to stop the chase from the rest of our army. He knows if he can knock out my Galatians, that's going to be it for my troops. I charge in some cavalry here, hoping to halt his advance, but again, my opponent drops the spears and gets the best of me in that engagement. Right here, my guys are wavering, but they're able to attack his companions. At the same time, I do have some Royal Peltists engaging his spears from the side. They're going to start crumbling relatively soon. You can see I'm getting the better of them, but my opponent keeps his cavalry cycle charging in and out, in and out. That's exactly what you want to do. You can see my Galatians right here. They charged his guys by accident, and they just lost 5 or 6 men right there in a couple seconds. So you can just see how much you have to babysit them and how effective these spears can be if you get them pointing in the right direction. My opponent's going to charge in. I activate shield wall, and even though he could have taken me out, he's going to be a very smart guy and not risk it. So that's very smart. He says I don't need to take these needless casualties. I have a lot of pikemen to use up, and he's going to save his horses for what they do best, which is charging into the backs of my men, which is exactly what he does right here. I pop a rally. I know that's going to be basically the end of my general, and I'm going to try and at least get some on the flanks of his guys here, but you can see he already has some guarding the backs of his men. He's forming them up in sort of a not a new box, but a defensive position, holding off the slaughter basically right here, and my guys start to waver, start to rout, and we call it a game. So I hope you guys enjoyed that battle. Very, very well played on my opponent's side. What I would say I could have done better was probably keeping more cavalry closer to my main body. In the end, my attack from the back was pretty effective, but just the sheer number of spears negated any effect that my cavalry or my elephants or even my chariots had. You can see here the number of kills of his pikemen was very high. My elephants and chariots were relatively low, and that's where the discrepancy came from. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. See you guys next time.